What's up guys? As most people know, I'm actually a really big fan of control decks. I've always said that I really don't like aggro decks and I like control decks a lot more. Anywhere from like mid-range to tempo to control is kind of more my area. It's not just like I have to play control, but I definitely try to avoid playing aggro, unless it's fairies because fairies are life. But other than that, like I really wanted to be able to put out a control deck for you guys because I feel like these are kind of those lists that you actually don't see quite often that in my opinion are just like the most fun to play. You get to be really greedy with your colors. You get to play a ton of colors and a ton of really cool cards that you might not really get to see in aggro decks because it is just about like pushing for damage in those kind of decks. So I figured I'd put out a really cool control deck. We still don't have dual stones. They're going to be coming out at the end of July. And so this is one of those decks that you get to use multiple colors in without having to have dual stones. So if you did want to play this kind of playstyle before those are released, I really recommend kind of a deck like this because it's just really fun. It is kind of on the pricier side due to the Rulers Memorias, but you can probably mess around with it and change it once dual stones come out if you do want to wait. But I'd have to take a look into it later and probably do like a revamp. But so it's going to be kind of a tempo, kind of really cool control deck I thought of. It's really similar to what we've seen in the past, so it's not like just like 100% original or anything, but there was kind of like a new card in BFA that came out that I think really shaped this deck really nicely, and I'll kind of go into that later too. But so typical, the ruler is Kaguya. The mana fixing on this is insane. I use this in fairies for that same reason too. But being able to use moon as green makes it so that your black moon memorias and your Moonbreeze Memorias are light green and black green, which I think are just really strong. And this deck actually, because it is a control deck, also you get to draw when a moon enters the field, which is really relevant in this deck, and I'll go over that later as well. But then her J ruler side is also what really matters in this deck. You get to shut people down, and because Machina is really big right now, you can stop his enter effect because that is an automatic ability, and so it's really nice to be able to stop that. You don't really care too much about the awakenings, but you do have Tsukuyomi in here, which could trigger that off if you want to get her to get the buff. And then her God Art to rest everything and recover everything is kind of just like a last moment kind of finisher. You can rest everything to push in for some damage, and of course the cancel effect is the most important, and this side color fixes as well. So being able to just make moon into green I think is crazy. I love being able to use all the control cards from green without having to invest in like, because typically green has always been like ramp and control, but it sucks to have to play ramp in my opinion because I don't particularly like ramp. I think it's like if you get outpaced, you have all these stones and no cards to do anything. So typically when you play green, you're kind of stuck in that route. But in this kind of deck, you get to use the mana dorks and the control side of all the counters with the deck, but without having to use all of the other kind of bad angles, I guess, green has. But I mean, ramp is cool if you're using like Kung Long or something, because that's a really good win condition. But other than that, it's not really doing much right now. So for the stone lineup, there's 4 Rulers Memoria. This stone is the only really expensive card in all of Force of Will. I'm really hoping we get those like Italian promos. I don't know if they're gonna ever print them in English, but there are these like alternative art Rulers Memorias that I feel like might make the price of them drop if they're like widely accessible, but I'm not sure if we're going to get them anytime soon. This won't matter as much when dual stones come out because they've already said that Lapis Cluster as well won't have any Regalia. Regalia is just kind of like exclusive to the Seven Kings land, so that world uses Regalias, and if you follow the lore, like the characters gain power from them, but they get them from like magic stones in other worlds. So that, and they also have power from like memories, so that's why we get Memorias in this kind of world, and in the other ones we had dual stones. So there isn't going to be Regalias ever again. Those are just like exclusive to the Seven Kings land, unless they revisit that land, but it's like completely destroyed, so I don't think that's going to be possible. And then so this stone is really good right now, but I'm sure over time when decks just stop using Regalia and they kind of become a thing of the past, this won't be so important. But as of right now, it's still a really good stone, and you need it to be able to produce all the colors. I don't use red though. And then 3 Moonbreeze Memoria. So I've said this in a lot of my videos before. I don't like using any double colored cards. So let's say if you have a card like Celestial Wing Seraph or Tsukuyomi that costs 2 light and then like whatever other cost. I don't like using any card like that, even if it's just a 2-drop. Like if a card is 2 white and that's it, just like Tsukuyomi. I don't like using it unless I have 7 of that mana pool in my mana. So I mean, I guess in my Magic Stone area. So the 4 Rulers Memoria can produce light, and soak in 3 Moonbreeze Memoria. So I have 7 light. And then I also run 3 Black Moons Memoria, and so I have 7 black. So there's 7 black, 7 light, 10 green essentially, because this is all green, and then 4 blue. So the Ruler's Memoria is the only blue, but I don't really focus much on blue. It's just for like 2 cards, I believe. And so that's really important, I think, for people to understand. If you ever deck build or you want to get creative, even if you're just playing fun decks, I've noticed that like 6 to 7 is a sweet spot, but I really rather prefer 7. Always aim to have at least 7 of something if you want to use dual color cards. If it's just like 1, like Hera has 1 blue, so you can use like 4, that's totally fine. But you really don't want to push it with cards that require 2. Because like, let's say if I didn't have the Moonbreeze Memorias and I had like 4 Rulers, 4 Black Moons, and let's say 2 Moonbreeze. Imagine if you hit like a Rulers, then a Black Moons, then a Black Moons, then a Black Moons, and then a Moonbreeze, or then another Rulers Memoria. It makes it so that like till turn 5 you couldn't play your turn 2 card, and it's just a lot less likely to happen when you run 7/7. So I have 7 black, 7 light, 10 green, and 4 blue, and that's kind of just like the Magic Stone lineup. And then in terms of the main deck, I still think Moonbreeze Elf is just like one of the best cards in the entire game. I've noticed that against the Machina matchup, them not being able to target attack this with Clockwork Soldier, since Moonbreeze can't get attacked, is just ridiculously powerful. This card staying on the field makes it so you can actually catch up, and it makes it so that your counters are so much easier to use. It gets really annoying if they start playing Dark Machina early to like fill up their hand, or sometimes they just like rely on sitting on TikTok or the Roblox, which could be really frustrating as well. And since you know Machina is not going to drop anything like really big, you can just use your counters early game to take care of all the early boards so they can't set up, and then just shut them down late game with Kaguya. So I think Moonbreeze Elf is just insane in this deck. And then there's Tsukuyomi. This is just still one of the best cards in the entire game. I think I couldn't fit the last drop in this deck, but I wanted to so bad for Tsukuyomi because I think that card with Hera and Tsukuyomi is just so powerful. So Tsukuyomi destroys additions if you awaken it by playing 1 moon, and that lets you destroy Barrier of Shadow so they can't lock down your Regalia. And then she even gains 2+1/+1 counters, so she becomes a 7/9, which I think is even crazier because like that's actually like really big. And then on top of that, your opponent can't use their activated abilities unless they control a moon. And Tsukuyomi herself is a moon, so it says neither player can do it, but like it counts itself, so you can do it. And it's really good because you lock down Mana Dorks, you lock down the Clockwork Soldier's buff effect, you lock down what was it? There was one more really important card, remember? Oh, like Guinevere and stuff like that. So it's really just important to be able to lock down those cards. It becomes too relevant just to keep swinging. It's also like a very like heavy poke deck. Like you don't have any like huge hitters in this deck outside maybe Celestial and Lucifer, which technically people take care of really easily. They're kind of more there like to help push for damage, but your opponent like typically gets rid of them quite easily. And having a 5 that just keeps swinging is just really good. And then 3 Hera. I still think Hera is really relevant in the main. I wanted to play 4 of this, but I wanted to fit Barrier of Shadows too, so I had to cut 1 down for a barrier. Hera destroying a Regalia is just really important. Machina is the only deck that doesn't really run Ruler's Memoria, and he still uses Maribel half the time, so you can destroy Maribel. If they don't use Maribel, you can always side these out too, so it's not too big of a deal. There's always like more cards like Interdimensional Escape and stuff you can put in against Machina, so it's not too hindering in the main. I also made a Deathscythe, so sometimes in like a really bad scenario, if you have a bunch of Heras, you could just start herring your own Deathscythes and then drawing like that. And so Hera is just like really strong. It's also one of the main pokers, so like swinging for 5 every turn kind of really adds up. And then the card that I was talking about that BFA released that I think is actually really good and which gives this deck a really cool angle is Alice of Shadow. So of course I mentioned this in the other video I used this, but you can't have it on this side in your deck. It has to be on the light side, but I didn't want to kind of focus on talking about the light side because it's not that important. And so I just left it on this side. But for anyone that runs this card, it has to be on the other shift side. And you can still play this side in the chase if you pay the top left casting cost. So like if you just pay 1 black and 2 colorless, you can still summon this. So just make sure it has to be on the other side in your deck. But why I think this card makes this deck really good is it says when this card enters the field or shifts, you destroy a target resonator who's 2 costs or less. And if you think about it, typically, if let's say you go first, you tap for a stone, let's say summon a 1-drop, your opponent taps for a stone, summons a 1-drop, you tap for a stone, summon a 2-drop, or hold a counter, your opponent tap for a stone, summons a 2-drop, and then on your third turn, you'd be able to summon Alice and destroy their 2-drops. Let's say they had like a land slot that you didn't negate because you had this in your hand and you knew you had a way to deal with it. You can just destroy the land slot. So, but the thing about cards like this is these kind of tempo cards, if you go second, when they drop their 3-drop, that's when you're tapping for a third stone. In kind of argument, they don't always, of course, have a 3-drop on turn 3, but let's say if you're just going with the pacing of the game, if they drop a 3-drop and then you tap for your third stone, your Alice no longer is able to destroy that 3-drop because she only destroys 2 or less, so it falls behind. But why it makes it so good in this deck is because you have access to Moonbreeze Elf. If you go first, you can use Alice as easy as turn 2 on their 1-drop, which puts you with a 5/7 that's really, really hard to get over that early. And then if you go second, they summon their 2-drop, and then you tap for your second stone, and you use the Moonbreeze and your 2 stones to summon this anyway, and you still destroy their 2-drop. So the fact that you have this tempo killer at that early of a game is really, really, really good. And then it even gives all other J/Resonators 200 attack, which is insane because I was saying that Tsukuyomi and Hera are the best pokers this deck has, and now you get another 5/7 that's really hard to kill because 7 defense is just like really weird to get over. Like Dark Purge doesn't kill it, Spacetime Anomaly doesn't kill it. You have to waste some kind of like removal on it because even like blocking it is really weird. So it even makes the Tsukuyomi into a 700, it makes the Hera into a 700. It's just so powerful. I think this card is really underestimated, and I think it's really going to make a difference like in the meta in general and in decks. Any kind of like, if anyone's been playing the game since the beginning, green black Abdul is really, really strong because you can always have like a step above your opponent. And I feel like it's that same concept where if you can play all black and all green, cards like this just become really strong because they help you make up for having cards like the mana dorks that otherwise might seem dead late game. Like even Moonbreeze Elf, I've been able to swing with the Moonbreeze Elf for 300, or no, 400. It's 200 attack, and like that damage really added up. I started like using it as an attacker because it was buffed by this. So I think it's just really, really strong. And then 2 Celestial Wing Seraph, it's still really good to have late game flyers, late game just anything to help push for damage. It summons Lucifer as well and can heal. So Lucifer of course removes targets. Why it's also really important to do this is because a lot of control decks suffer from this aspect of like where if you run a like really, really heavy counter count, you don't have anything, like if your opponent happens to, like if you're tapped out and your opponent sets up and you have like infinite counters but you're tapped out, you can't do anything anymore because you couldn't counter them in time and now you fall behind. But this deck has like just as much removal as it has counters, so you always have the option of like, what do I want to completely counter and not let them get the automatic ability of like any enter effect you just completely cancel, or do I want to let them hit the field? And then I have Lucifers, I have Alice. There's just so many ways you can get rid of stuff in this deck that it makes it so that you're not just playing like this counter war where if they go out faster than you, you just fall behind and lose. So that's typically, that should be all the creatures in the deck. But for the Regalia, because we do have Rulers in Moria, there is Apollo. I always talk about how I hate Regalia because they feel completely dead. Apollo is one of those ones that kind of feels like it makes up for it because if you bounce, like let's say a Celestial Wing Seraph or a Tsukuyomi when they try to destroy this, you can replay the Tsukuyomi and you draw another card because of Kaguya, and just be able to kind of make up for the fact that you had like a dead card in the beginning. Apollo is generally really good too because you could J-activate earlier, so you could J-activate and stop like Machina's Enter, or just have a 700 attacker, which gets buffed if you have Alice, of course. So it's really good. Like it even gives Kaguya flying, so it's just easier ways to push for damage. I have one Gleipnir. This card I think is super underestimated, and I don't know why people don't like it. I think Gleipnir in this deck is completely insane. Gleipnir says that you can force your opponent's Resonator to block, and what makes that so good is typically when you have Tsukuyomi on the field and your opponent has like a Wind Sprite or a Moonbreeze or a Guinevere, and you have Tsukuyomi and they can't use the effect, if you just attack, they're just not going to block and they're going to take the 500, but they're going to keep their cards. So eventually, like when they kill your Tsukuyomi, they're going to start being able to use their cards and kind of catch up for the turns they lost. And so with Gleipnir, you can target something like a Guinevere or a Wind Sprite to block, and typically when you do that, you go target Wind Sprite to block, they can just go, float in response, and now that card isn't forced to block. But when you pair this card up with Tsukuyomi, they can't respond with the tap effect, so they're forced to block it. So it makes it almost so that Tsukuyomi has like target attack against those kind of cards, and they can't even block with anything else because that card is forced to block. That along the fact that like Kaguya gets to draw if it deals damage, with flying that's not even a problem. It's just, I think it's really, really good. You just control the board. Alice even attacking for like 5/7 and being able to force block their like little stuff just makes it really, really, really powerful. And then Horn of the Sacred Beast, even though this deck is really good on control and destruction, sometimes if you go against other control decks, you'll run out of resource because like people can literally deck you out. And there's been times where I've actually wished I've had Horn to be able to shuffle my graveyard back into my deck. So now every single time I run Ruler's Moy, I just make sure to throw one of these in because it really, really helps. Like there's been times where I've literally lost because of decking out, and that was like the control player's like strategy at this point because they knew they weren't going to be able to like outpace my resource. So they were just like, oh, like all of his cards draw like Tsukuyomi and stuff. I'll just try to like negate the important damage cards and kill whatever I can until they deck out. So now they can't do that. And then Deathscythe. Deathscythe is really good for your own Hera, like I said. Sometimes when you play against non-Regalia decks, it makes the Hera like not worthless anymore. And then also like every now and then you'll play against like a dark deck that will use like Lapis's Dark Storm or something like Izanami, and it's really good to be prepared for stuff like that because you could just choose to discard this and then add it to your hand every time they attempt to discard more cards. It buffs Kaguya, it takes swiftness away from your opponent's ruler, as well as imperishable, and there is ways this deck can kill J rulers, so it's one of the better Regalias to have. And then just one Laevateinn, so gives it swiftness, can make her deal more damage. If you have like let's say Gleipnir in this, you can J-activate, swing for 900 damage technically because you might have been able to tap that during your draw. You can even make it like 1100, and then your opponent would take 1100 and you would draw a card. It also makes Kaguya like a decent finisher too because all the poking leaves your opponent really low, and sometimes you can't get like that final hit in. So it's nice to just be able to be like, oh, I have swiftness, you're dead. So Laevateinn's one of those better Regalias too. And then for non-Regalias, there's 3 Barrier of Shadows. You still want to slow Machina down as much as you can, as well as change the world for Reflect. Any fairies that use Regalias, this is really good against them as well, because they can't use Reflect like easily to be able to J-activate and search cards and use Change the World to draw like infinite cards. It just slows everything down, and with Hera, it just makes it really, really good. This card is just a complete must, I think, in most decks that if you're playing control and you know you're not going to be able to beat them quickly, you definitely have to make sure you can grind out the game and not let them use their cards freely. And then Wall of Wind, this with Moonbreeze I think is still like one of the best opens. I feel as though if I go like turn 1 Moonbreeze and I have Wall of Wind and I stop your turn 1 play and then use them in a 2-drop turn 2 and then I on my next turn use Dark Alice, I feel like you're losing that game no matter what. Like the amount of like tempo and control you gain from those 2 turns just puts you so far ahead, especially if you have like a Celestial, like an early Celestial into Lucifer, because you might have like another Moonbreeze or something and you might be able to do it around like turn 4-ish. It's just really, really, really good. Like it leaves your opponent with nothing, so the Lucifer picks out their like 1 relevant card, and then you're just swinging every turn while they're desperately trying to like kill your cards to come back. So I think Wall of Wind's really strong. It also stops cards like March of the Machines because like they never really have the the extra 1 to pay, because they do it once they're topped out and they have all their machines. So if they go like March and you just Wall of Wind, it just stops, and that's really cool too. And then Seal of Wind and Light, the only card in the game that actually stops Hunglong decks. Being able to awaken this against Hunglong is just really, really relevant because their Reflect can't negate it. They also can't negate with their own seals or Wall of Winds. It's just really important, and Hunglong I think has become really, really annoying. Like it's one of those decks that people actually are really playing right now, and it's kind of annoying for them to just do like absolutely nothing for 5 turns and then drop this big guy, and if you can't stop it, you lose. So between this and Kaguya, I think it gives you enough answers to Hunglong because they can't really do anything to destroy Kaguya anyway. And then the last card, my favorite card, I always say this, is Spacetime Anomaly. I think this card is just the best card in the entire game. Being able to pick off little stuff, especially in control, while having an answer to J rulers is just ridiculous. It fills up your hand, so it feels like you're not losing anything. There's even plays you can do where, typically in control decks, because your mana is always open, if you don't end up countering something, on your draw phase, you can like Spacetime Anomaly something small. Let's say they have their like 1 big card left on the field. You then recover, and then summon Celestial, your Lucifer kills their 1 big thing. You like drew a card for it, you put 2 cards in the field. It's just really, really, really good. Like if you go against a mirror match and they have a Kaguya, 1 Spacetime Anomaly used twice just kills it. Just the -5/-5 on this card is just insane. Like it -5s, you draw a card, it targets J-Rulers and Resonators, you can use it from the grave again. Like, it's just, there's like, it feels like it doesn't have any cost. Like, the blue-black, you're only really chasing after the blue, like I said, because you need the Rulers Memoria, but you have 7 black, so like, that's not even an issue. And it's just, this card is just like one of my favorite cards in the game. I was telling people that like, I'm pretty sure that this guy is like Lucifer, like right over here. And I was telling people that like, if I ever went to Worlds and like won, I would have like me over here, like water bending Lucifer's like dark bending spiral, and it would just be like us battling it out, because like I literally love this card that much. That, or I'd probably be forced to pick like the Vingolf Alexander, because like obvious reasons, but that would be pretty cool too. But yeah, Spacetime Anomaly is just like my favorite card. I think this card is just like absolutely insane. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the deck profile. Control decks I don't get to do too often, so I'm really happy to have put it out there. I've done like Fairies and Machinas coming up really soon. I was actually going to do that this weekend, but my friend's borrowing my Machina deck, so I don't have the cards to do it. But it should be coming like fairly early next week, probably like Tuesday or something. But I've typically been doing aggro decks like this whole time, so it's really nice to be able to put a control deck out there. Like, this is probably the deck I'm going to be playing alongside 12 Apostles just this entire format, because I really like both of those decks. When Dual Stones come out, I'll be doing updates to older decks. I really want to try this Arla deck I've had kind of in mind. That's semi-similar to this one, but being able to hide behind the bows feels really cool. So just in general, Dual Stones I think are going to bring like a really cool aspect to the game, and I really can't wait to see like all the new decks that I'm going to be able to think of kind of with the addition of all of those stones. So definitely more Machina is going to be coming. I might be doing an Allosaurus deck profile. I've been kind of thinking about like a true successor, like you kill him in order to kill your opponent deck, but I'm not too sure how it's going to work out. I have to kind of test it out first, but there's definitely going to be more deck profiles, so subscribe if you haven't, and make sure to comment if you have any questions. You can ask me on Twitter or Facebook too. I have them in the description. The list will be in the description, and I'll definitely catch you guys next time.